This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.
Well, hey everyone, thank you so much for listening. This is Mark Bayer, and you are along for another episode of When Science Speaks. Today's episode is brought to you by Bayer Strategic Consulting, an advocacy and training firm in Washington, D.C. that helps scientists and engineers get funding, gain influence, and build key relationships with the stakeholders who matter the most to them. I am so happy that we have Dr. Mike Fenn with us today. Mike leads the Harvard Life Science Startup Ecosystem as the Director for Healthcare and Life Sciences at Harvard Innovation Labs. In his leadership role, Mike focuses on creating new technologies and fostering the broader innovation ecosystem by working at the intersection of academic research, life science entrepreneurship, and the biotech industry. He's leading the planning of a new $10 million translational biotech incubator at Harvard Medical School, and he's working closely with the Office of Technology Development Leadership on entrepreneurship and commercialization initiatives in his leadership role. Mike has been the first employee at a biotech startup. He's led business development. He's built a robust IP portfolio, invented a nanoparticle drug delivery platform for ophthalmology, fibrosis, autoimmune, and inflammatory diseases. As co-founder and scientific advisor for over a dozen startups, Mike has spearheaded the raising of $25 million in venture funding. He's co-founded Florida Tech's Biomedical Engineering Department as an assistant professor there, established a translational research center, and acquired $1.75 million in research funding. Mike has earned his PhD in biomedical engineering, his master's in materials science and engineering, and his bachelor's in chemistry, all from the University of Florida. Welcome to the show, Mike. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Mark.
Now, you have focused on life sciences pretty much from the start of your professional career, and just, interested, what led you to specialize in biotech?
Yeah, so kind of done a number of different areas that I've focused on, starting kind of in chemistry and biochemistry, and it actually really kind of started in more like pharmacology and drug delivery, and then kind of as I progressed through my career, studied material science and engineering, biomaterials, and biomedical engineering, and as a professor, I did a lot of work on everything from applications of biomaterials and the bio-nano interface for materials development for devices and some diagnostics, and then started getting back more into drug delivery, kind of coming full circle, and then really just being enthusiastic about where the cutting edge of biotech was going, and the fact that some of the new therapeutic modalities were kind of coming off of the hype cycle and becoming more of a reality, and realizations in the clinic. This is where I felt I could add a lot of value, and also what I was really most excited about in cell therapies and gene therapies and just new delivery modalities and mechanisms. Being able to really apply my background in nanomedicine and nanoparticles, something that was, when I started out, actually more like science fiction, and it's now become more science fact. So that's really been, I think, a big driver for me, is being able to see some of these things actually used in the clinic, and it being part of the science and technology to actually develop these things and bring them out of the lab where they've been for so long.
Yeah, that's great. I want to ask you about that translational role too, just in a moment. You've been immersed in the startup ecosystem for many, many years. It's kind of described in the intro, leading roles as a professor, founder, board advisor, VC, other executive positions. And as I was thinking about that, Leo Tolstoy famously wrote that all happy families are alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And so I thought a question that you could be particularly well qualified to answer, sort of from your 360-degree perspective, is, what do you think, what do you see as like all successful startups having in common? And then what are big mistakes that you've seen that just tend to doom startups?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, but I think one commonality is by far the team, the people that are working on the startup, that are the co-founders, both the scientific co-founders and the kind of the more business-oriented, business savvy co-founders. But I think by and far, it's the team, and then early on, it's the science, especially in biotech. It's got to be driven by the science. It's got to be science first. But first and foremost, the team. If you don't have the team, you don't have the right people on the team, the right chemistry amongst the people on the team, I think you're going to be doomed. No matter how great the science is, I don't think it matters. The team is everything. So getting the right people on the team, building the right team at the right time, getting the right people in the right place, having the right mindset and culture early on, I think is extremely important. And if you can do that, then I think your likelihood of success is much better. I think with even science that may not be as good as the best science, if you've got a great team, your potential for success is much higher. So team first and science first, probably up there close to one another. And if it's an academic spin out or technology coming out of a lab, I think also what's important is, again, getting the right people in the right time, but also providing a framework for those academic type, the academic type of founders to be able to work within, and helping them understand that if they really want to see this thing, their technology have impact, they're going to have to let part of it go. They're going to have to allow that business savvy CEO type expert to come in, when that time comes, to be able to help run that show, right? And I think that's part of, really being able to recognize what you don't know. And that's a really important skill set that I try to instill in the founders that I work with, and even in myself, and recognizing that I don't know everything, and what it is I don't know, and when that comes, when that comes to light, that there's something that I don't know or the founders don't know, it's how to most effectively and efficiently find the person or the people who do know. So all very team-centric, team-oriented. And again, I can't even really overstate this. I think building and establishing a culture early on amongst that team, even if it's 2 or 3 people, right? Like, what is the culture of that company going to look like? And if it's even a few people, I think you can do that. It's all about the mindset and the attitude, and the understanding that it's going to be really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also a big part is that it's going to be hard. There's going to be tough times. There's going to be challenges, but you're going to have to know how to work and come together and be able to work together to get through those challenging times.
Is that really helpful, really specific as well? And you touched upon a couple of different issues. I want to just ask with one of them, which is really this translational research, making this transition from the lab, to the boardroom, whatever you want to call it, try to commercialize work that's come out of the research lab, and how that can be something very difficult to do, as you've alluded to. Of course, you as you described yourself as a recovering professor, so you're very familiar with the academic mindset, and you've been living, you're a native species to this entrepreneurial ecosystem now as well. And so one of the things, and so I'm asking you about, people like to talk about the ability to commercialize academic research, and you pointed out some of the challenges of doing that, not knowing when to let go, recognizing what you don't know, and then building this team of folks, getting people who do are able to or familiar with these areas that you're not really familiar with. Are there other things that you can think of along those lines too? Maybe if listeners who are in the lab now, they're intrigued by a potential career as an entrepreneur, maybe taking research that they already have and translating it. Number one, they need to be conscious of building a great team. You need to remember that at some point, it's not the same as being in a lab when you're in the business world. Any other sort of major themes that you'd like to add to that?
Always, being willing to learn new skills, right? And constantly, being a lifelong learner, and, being open to new perspectives, being able to collaborate, multidisciplinary in a
Hmm.
multidisciplinary way. I think that's a big requirement. I mean, I think it's almost a requisite for any new biotech startup that's truly doing innovative work and working on technology that's, first in class. I think the multidisciplinary nature of the research, I think you've really got to understand, how to work with people from other fields and other
Hmm.
areas and very, very different, areas. I think it's super important. We talk a lot about it in academia, but I think it's lesser practiced. Being at a school like Harvard, it's giant university, very siloed, 12 different schools, right? And, 12, 13 different hospitals, each one kind of being its own fiefdom. People like to categorize themselves, right, and like to have their names and affiliations, which I think, in and of itself can make for some challenges in terms of getting over there. I don't think that's unique to Harvard. I think that's, it's just one example, but that can make for a lot of artificial challenges and barriers that don't necessarily need to exist. That can, be prohibitive in terms of the success of a startup, of a technology, being able to spin a technology out.
Hmm.
So I think, being willing to be open to work with others, to share, in this idea with others, being able to let go of some part of the ownership and others to, claim some of the ownership. It all goes down to the saying of, it's better to own, 10% of $1 billion than, 0% or 100% of something that's worth $0, right? And I think that's a big part of the understanding. I think letting go of egos and, really understanding that these types of things have to be team efforts, right? It's not like, back in the day when these scientific discoveries were based on, much more basic research in one particular field, where you had this one, kind of brilliant scientist that would make this discovery and take it through to become the next penicillin or something, right? I
Hmm.
mean, nowadays with, especially, the cell and gene therapies I keep going back to, but I think it's a great example, right? Where the very complex therapies that requires people from many different backgrounds, especially as now more data-driven approaches become, kind of the thing where a lot of people are focused on there being data, driven machine learning, AI, et cetera,
Hmm.
kind of into the foray. I think it's even and ever more important that you have this ability, this multidisciplinary mindset and ability to work across different boundaries. And not just, I think the other part that I try to really espouse to a lot of our, trainees and postdocs and PhD students is, don't box yourself in. Don't try to just label yourself. And I see this a lot. I think it's kind of a relic of the academic past,
Hmm.
where you label yourself. Oh, I'm a protein chemist, so all I can do is protein science, right? I can only do, and then, well, that's good. You need protein scientists, but you need protein scientists who can work with cell biologists, who can work with molecular biologists, who can work with, with the computational biologist. But not only that, with somebody who can go work with, an engineer, or who can go work with a commercialization expert, or the CEO, the business development team. You've got to be able to have, a multi-flavored background. You can have your domain expertise, but you've got to be able to have those communications and be able to switch back. And I think that's what really makes, very successful entrepreneurs.
That's such a great point. It was really where I was going next too, because implicit in what you're talking about, and you mentioned it, specifically at the end, is communication, right? And in
Mm,
addition to all of your scientific expertise and the deep subject matter expertise that you have in the business world, obviously in the lab, and related to things like that, you also are an excellent communicator, which is really one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show,
mm,
because it's a rare quality to be able to do both of those things. And many of our listeners are fascinated and are trying to aim for that kind of capability, adding on to
mm,
what you, as you said, the protein chemist who wants to be a better public speaker, for example.
mm.
Be able to
Yeah.
talk to the CEO, be able to talk to media, or whatever is needed, policymakers, whoever it happens to be, way outside
Mm,
of the area of expertise that he or
mm,
she has as a technologist or as a chemist. So I'd love for you to share some of the strategies and the approaches and the outlook that you adopt and that you teach entrepreneurs who are technical experts but need to be so much more, as you've described.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, communication, man, that's a big one. It's interesting because I think as scientists, and engineers, we actually are really good at communicating, but only in specific, through specific mediums and channels, right? Which are, publishing papers and giving
Mm-hmm.
scientific talks. And this kind of goes to like a broader theme that I often talk about with, PhD students, especially, and with postdocs, which is you're actually, as a postdoc or PhD student, as a trainee in science, you've actually learned a lot of great skills to be an entrepreneur, right? And communication being one, right? Learning how to communicate is a key. When I have PhD students, this is one of the key skills that I wanted them to be able to learn, right? In any and every opportunity that they had to communicate their science, especially in different settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just giving another scientific talk, but to go to, different types of conferences, more business-oriented conferences, more even conversations with the tech transfer office or with the collaborators we're working with, right? Including them, in the meetings. I worked with a number of industry on a number of industry partnerships and with startups, and including them on these meetings to be able to come and talk with these people who are in very different parts of the life science space. I think is so important to be able to have that that ability to kind of cross communicate with these folks. But I think more broadly, as I was going, folks with PhDs, you've gone through that process of learning, and it's and I think people get often stuck on what they learned or what they did, and the research they did, but it's really the skills, right? No one really actually ever cares about your dissertation, right? The topic that
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once in a while that happens, but rarely is it actually, right? And it's more about the skills that you've learned, right? And especially the soft skills. And as a PhD, you learn things like communication, but you also learn how to fail really well, right? You should, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, this is a big part of being a scientist, right? You go and you do experiments, and most of the time they don't work out, right? And if they are working out every time, or the majority of the time, you're probably not doing something all that interesting or all that innovative, right? So I think those particular experiences I think are really critical and actually translate really well to entrepreneurship. Is learning how to fail and learning not just that you failed and then to go back and try again, but really like how to synthesize and take those results and communicate those results to all different types of people to then come up with that next plan or that next step, right? I think that's extremely critical, and it's something that you do learn. I think you just have to have a different perspective, a different mindset of how to look at entrepreneurship from basic science.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to shift gears a little bit, Mike, and ask you to think about your own career and your years of experience building and advising companies. You talked about nanotechnology a bit, and I'm wondering if you have a proudest professional achievement, or what some of your proudest professional achievements are to this point in your career.
I mean, I don't know. I've done so many different things. And I'm still, what is my, my greatest achievement? I'm not, I don't know. I've had many things that I've been fortunate to be able to be part of and accomplish. I think some of my greatest achievements probably go back to, people that I've mentored or
Mm-hmm.
that I've, taught, that have, either worked for me or I've worked with, and, they say they've learned, something from me. Oftentimes, they tell me they learned so much, from working with me, but in reality, it's me that's learned so much from them. I think really that, being a mentor and being a teacher, in the end, is something that's probably the most valuable to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I really love, the fact that I can take my experiences and translate those to others, and, people can gain much from that and be able to take that in their own successes. So that's something, and having been a professor, a part of the job is teaching. A lot of it is mentoring, right? And that's something that I've had a lot of students and trainees that I'm extremely proud of. Had a lot of founders that I've worked with and work with currently. Again, as a mentor or an advisor who have just done incredible things, and to be part of that for me is something that I would say is, one of the crowning achievements. but I've worked on a lot of different things, right? I've worked on a lot of different things. There's been technologies that I'm really proud of and that I, still am working on.
Mm-hmm.
Now to this day, there's several companies I still support that's based on technologies that we developed in my research lab.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also really cool, right? The fact that, some of these technologies are now getting to the clinic or getting close to the clinic, where they will actually maybe have impacts on patients is a huge, it's huge. It's huge to think that like something that started on the bench top in a little research lab that I was able to build, coming right out of a PhD and into a tenure track position and building this lab and providing the space, the playground for these things to be developed.
Mm-hmm.
And now, years later, they're getting to the point where they're potentially going to have impact on patients. That also. So I think for me, training, mentorship, and potential impact, I'm driven very much by anything that provides me the ability to have impact, broader
Right.
impact
Right.
on patients and people.
Right. Absolutely the theme of what you're talking about. So fascinating. So I'd just like to wrap up by asking you, what's the latest news from Harvard Innovation Labs? What are you up to these days?
Yeah, so this is a big time of year for us right now. We've got a lot of things going on. Of course, everything's now virtual. Everything's gone remote. So we've transitioned actually pretty smoothly. I've been really surprised. We transitioned all our programming and content, all of our incubator programming and accelerator programming. We've translated that to a virtual type of format, which has actually been pretty successful. But next week we have we're in the midst of our big pitch competition, our annual pitch competition called the President's Innovation Challenge, and we had I don't remember exactly the total number of teams that we started with, probably close to 200 venture teams that we started with, startups, competing for this prize. And so next week we have our live judging that will be done. It's closed door sessions. It's done live judging. We have 25 finalist teams out of that larger batch of about 200 that are going to be pitching and competing for $500,000 in funding across 5 cohorts of startups. So that's probably the biggest thing we have going on right now. So next week they'll be doing the live judging with the pitches. And then 2 weeks later, we're going to announce the finalists, do the award show on May 21st. So everyone, keep an eye out for that. I think it'll be really exciting. Last year we had a great show. We were obviously in person. We had about 1,000 people come out. Gave away $400,000. This year we have an extra $100,000 from our donor. Really fortunate to have the Berarelli family on board, providing that money to add an additional cohort from our Life Lab, our Life Lab startups. So that's probably the biggest thing we have upcoming here before the summer. And then, looking forward to what this next year of the quote unquote new normal is going to hold, and how we're going to be able to continue to deliver value to the founders who we serve.
Great. So much interesting information, really inspiring, the type of work that you're doing, making an impact, as you pointed out, across the board. Really fascinating. Dr. Michael Fenn, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And listeners, thanks for being here for this episode of When Science Speaks. And I hope you will be back next time for the next episode of When Science Speaks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe. Check us out on the web at whensciencespeaks.com, and we'll see you next time.